Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the final meeting for the year for our risk committee, which is one of the first of the rounds that I'm going through. So I don't know whether that's encouraging or not for everybody, but it is, I guess. So welcome to it. Of course, as always, this is a live stream meeting. And I'm not certain we have anybody on live stream other than we are expecting Chris Janae, our audit director, to join us soon, which is, oh, there goes Chris right there. G'day, Chris, how are you? And Chris's appearance is such that I would like to, with the agenda, move his item 8.1 up to the first item after we've adopted the minutes. So, fairness to Chris, I know he's got a few things on which will happen. If I move to the apologies, please. I have one from Rangi. He is obviously out today. I think otherwise we're all here, if that's correct. So I'll move from the chair that we accept the apologies. Thank you, Grant. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against, it's carried. Any matters of interest people need to declare? I would just like to note one matter, and it comes up in public excluded, or what's planned to be public excluded in Patricia's, your report, where there's a small note around risk pool and the Napier City Council decision. May well be that subject to a discussion. I'm the chair of Napier City's Audit and Risk Committee, and for various reasons have been involved in discussions with risk pool. So I'd just like to note that. I think the nature of the item isn't one where that needs to preclude me from discussion. But if I could just note that, please, that would be valuable. Public forum, I haven't been informed of anybody. Can we move and take both sets of minutes together, which is the minutes of the 19th September and the 25th of October? 25th of October, ably led by Leslie, because we were just dealing with the annual report. So it looks like Tom's moved it and Leslie seconded it. Is there any discussion, corrections? I think there was one, but I'll get it to you, Liz. I think I saw a word that needed to change, but that's fine. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. There was one action point out of this which hasn't been done, and I'd refer you to page 9 of 63 in our agenda, which is the second resolution of the Chair develop a program for the next 12 months with Mr. Jackson, the Chief Executive, and the Chief Risk Officer, and we haven't done that. I'll be up front. Having said that, I'm very encouraged by this meeting, which when we sat down to plan it, reflected what I think was something of a more normal approach, which was based around our risk and assurance brief. But that is still outstanding and will be done for the new year. Any other matters of action or open items that people wanted to raise? Being none, I'll keep moving on. Now, as I said, I'd like to move item 8, please, up to now, because we have Chris on the and Jenna, welcome Jenna, on the Zoom, and Patricia, I wonder if you'd like to lead off, please, with your paper.
Thanks, Bruce. Morning, councillors. So the cover paper really just summarises the focus of the memo from Chris, which I'll get him to speak to more fulsomely. Where we are at last night, we have received the draft management letter from Audit New Zealand on the annual report. So staff are this morning going through that. We will, our responses to that and the final letter will come back to this committee in the new year. And in relation to the LTP, as I understand it, and Chris will have an update, we are not in a position yet to discuss the fee for the LTP audit, but Chris has included what would be covered. We're still waiting on the Office of the Auditor General to advise what fees will be for the LTP audit rounds. So if I hand over to Chris, it's probably better for you to discuss the memo.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Chris. In your hands, any salient points you'd like to raise, please?
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Bruce. Good morning, everyone. I think the update letters obviously covers two matters that Patricia's outlined, being the completion of the 2023 audit and the 24-34 long-term plan audit planning. The update on the audit report, I think that generally reflects the audit opinion discussion that we had at the last committee meeting, obviously being the two qualification areas, the first being around the revaluation movement for 2022, reflected in the comparative information, second being around the traffic counts, which were discussed, as well as highlighting the emphasis and matter there in relation to the Three Waters reform. Sort of round out the 5 probably of the most significant matters that were in relation to the audit. The first there being the carrying value of property, plant and equipment. So that just talks briefly around the revaluation that occurred, noting that's fairly stated in the financial statements. Also outlining that no further valuations were required as a result of management's fair value assessment, checking that there was no difference between the carrying value of assets and the possible fair value should they have been valued. Couple of points in there around the Invercargill Central Limited being the write down of the investment and the loan to it. Probably key things to take away from that being we agreed with the accounting treatment proposed to us around the write down and that flowing up through the group. The second one there being around the loan impairment, which I think is 2.48 million. Main key focus there really is around the key assumptions, particularly around default rates and the loss given default. Agreed with the assessment overall there. Last couple of points are next points around service performance reporting. So there was a new standard this year, and that's just highlighting that following review of compliance with that standard that you've complied with that. A few changes there really around the judgments that you make in applying your performance reporting. Those are probably the key things that you sort of that you'll actually see in the annual report. And then obviously the last one there around drinking water quality performance measures. So that one there was just the change in regulatory regime occurring during the year, equally being that causing some level of uncertainty around what to be reported until DIA provided some guidance in that space. And as a result, that meant that Council's expert was able to carry out their work in compliance with that guidance, and obviously we were satisfied with that, given that is what the sector was doing. I think that broadly covers sort of the backward looking, and then sort of moving into the forward looking. As Patricia outlined there, we sort of kicked off planning for the 24-34 long-term plan audit. The key dates have agreed are in the paper there. The other thing sort of I've noted there is we've kicked out a self-assessment, which is a tool used to sort of help us with risk assessment around the long-term plan process and make sure that sort of that's developing in terms of the areas of focus and risks that we see. But at the moment, I thought it was sensible that we relay to you the areas of focus as we see them now, and you know those will be refined and put into an audit engagement letter once we've had a look at the responses to that self-assessment as well, and see if there's anything more bespoke or specific to council. So those areas of emphasis are covered in the appendix to the letter, and I think probably the other key point out of that, out of the body of that letter there is that, as Patricia alluded to, we're not in a position to issue the audit engagement letter, and that's just generally around the fee process still being finalised by the office. The fee is a significant component of that engagement letter, and I can't issue it until it's put in there. So that's sort of the key hold up there. So we try to give you everything here we can that would be in that engagement letter bar that fee. In terms of that appendix, I won't go through that in detail because there is a bit there. That covers generally our scope of our audit, which is really driven by the legislation of the Local Government Act, you know, what opinions we need to provide, and that ultimately drives the work that we do. The areas of emphasis that are in there, some of them will seem familiar to people around the table. I think probably worth commenting on the key, what's changed in that space. There's been a bit of a tweak around our focus in terms of the economic environment post-COVID-19. Last time it was very sort of focused around being within the pandemic. Now it's more a look at, you know, inflation, interest rates, and what that means for your financial strategy and affordability considerations for the long-term plan. The reforms focus there also reflects the current state of the legislation, noting there's a level of uncertainty around that, given the picture may change during the long-term plan process, and assumptions are probably the key thing to highlight there is a lifting of the bar around climate change assumptions, given ever-increasing public interest and events that have occurred over the last couple of years. So I think that's probably it, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate the response really to my request that we have some update on the LTP, and in effect what I really take as a commitment from both sides in terms of when the audit will actually occur. Appreciate the fees outstanding, which is a different matter, but I won't comment on that today. Folk, do we have questions for Chris at this point? Oh, Nobby.
Yeah, just a signal, which I've signalled once before. It worries me that we don't have the fees for next year declared before, but I'll just declare again so that people are clear about my position. I'm going to write directly to the Auditor General about this. I've already raised it through Local Government New Zealand. I've sent them a paper, and they are concerned. So local government, on behalf of the majority of councils, are saying the fees are escalating too quickly, and we will approach this problem by saying we just can't afford the increases. Some cases 200% over a very short period of time, and we will be suggesting to the Auditor General that some of the stuff that's currently audited could be left, where it's not in an annual audit. It could be in a biannual or triannual audit, which would reduce the amount of audit work that needs to be done, and with it reduces the cost of the audit. So I just wanted to signal that. Didn't want Chris to find out through a third party that I'm doing that, but so that's about to happen.
Thanks, Nobby. Appreciate the advice. I was about to say the warning. I don't think it's a warning, but I think the office can expect a good number of letters going to it for the situation that the sector finds itself in. Hope you have other questions on the report. Just a couple from me, Chris, if that's okay. Look, firstly, thank you for the management report. The draft's being thrown in front of my face by Patricia this morning, so I understand the sort of the direction of travel is comments back from you, Patricia, and that'll be tidied up before the end of the year, so that our first meeting in the new year we'll see it. Thank you that you've given us a strong sense of what will be in it. I don't think for the committee's purpose at this stage any of that's a particular surprise, because you've well signalled that through the course of the audit and in the closeout, which I appreciate. A couple of questions on the LTP audit, and I appreciate that we've got a couple of papers, both a risk paper, a long-term plan paper, and also in public excluded the risk paper around it. But look, I'd like to ask a general question. The core emphasis on the work is in the 5 weeks starting 15 January. I'm probably looking at you, Patricia. We will be ready. That's I don't know whether it's got an exclamation mark or a question after it. You can take it as both.
It's an exclamation mark. We will be ready.
We will be ready. Good. And that seems like a Christmas break for most folk. Obviously, Chris and Jenna, that's you've agreed it, so that's we're working to that. Brilliant. Look at those nods. I like that. Can I just ask a question, Chris, of you as the opinion giver? Under the attest audit, the annual audit, you have a prescription of the opinion fairly reflects for both the consultation document where you do most of the work. The qualitative assessment is that it gives effect to the purpose of the Act. Now that's qualitative or judgmental in nature. Is there anything in particular, you've hinted at climate change, which I presume you would expect to see inside the consultation document? Does that mean if we don't have it, you would qualify because it doesn't meet the purpose of the Act? It's speculative, but I'm interested to know how you're going to exercise your judgment over the CD.
It's not an easy question, Bruce. Look, I think, it's a significant assumption at the end of the day, and you're looking at it like you would look at any significant assumption. So I think ultimately it is a reasonableness judgment. Setting the bar of reasonableness, I think, is the crux of your question. That will be established for the sector, I think, as the office goes through its processes. I mean, ultimately, we knew that bar last time it will be a higher bar this time. So I think it really is looking at what those plans were around that assumption, what you're looking to manage or adapt. Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for you, Bruce, to be honest.
Okay, look, I just want to clarify something again. I appreciate this is not your engagement letter, but I noted on our agenda 54 of 63, page 54, and it's page 12 of your actual memo.
Yep.
You indicate we expect the City Council to reflect information on the impacts of climate change identified in the last 3 years and climate change assumptions and work plans outlined in the LTP. Are you referring to the last LTP or the current LTP or the LTPB?
It's the current one.
The current one.
That's saying any initiatives that you've had in place over the last 3 years and the focus and the impact that would have on forecast reporting.
Yeah, with the expectation that we would then have essentially a right debate question in our CD as a result.
Yep.
Okay, that's good. I just was keen to know that was the case, Patricia. I assumed that was the case, but I just wanted to. I think I wanted us to be clear around here. Look, that's fine. We'll talk later, Chris, about the issues of Three Waters and bits and pieces which are affecting this LTP, which I'll be keen to work through with staff. The only other thing then, and I guess I do come around back, Patricia, to my question around are we ready, is the importance of the financial model, the infrastructure and the financial strategy. We're okay on that, because that's the foundation to the LTP, correct?
It's the foundation. We are work in progress, and we'll have there's a workshop next week with councillors.
Brilliant.
That brings in all that, and then I think the December council meeting has got the activity management plans. I'm looking at Rhiannon, so she can give me a nod. I'm trying to remember. There's the flow through, and it's in the paper that's later through, is into what the trajectory to date has been on the LTP, and then we were still to go.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you. I've had a fair go at these guys. Is there anything else people would like to raise, given I've raised a few questions in the course of it? There's never a let up, is there, Patricia?
Nobby.
Oh, sorry, Nobby.
Just one thing around the climate change. It seems to me when I look at other councils, everybody's doing their own thing on climate change, and so you'd expect an element of uniqueness about that, because what we have in Southland might be completely different to what's on Banks Peninsula or whatever. But I'm wondering whether with a new government there'll be a change on climate change. And what I'm just alerting to is that I think central government may take away each council's desire to do standard climate change stuff. Do we all go to e-cars, those sorts of issues, and throw that in with the regional councils. And I'm hearing some talk about that maybe regional councils will be responsible for geographical areas, big geographical areas, so that there's some uniformity of approach to climate change, so that one council's not doing something and another council's doing something else, and really at the end of the day we're not making a hell of a lot of difference. So just, I guess I'm signaling that may change for us. We'll have the whatever you want to call it, the mitigation stuff that will be unique to each area, but adaptation might be something completely different.
I like the point you raise, actually, Nobby, because in reality it's a bit like the annual report this year, wasn't it? We're always trying to work out where's central government going, and actually the bite is really on us now, that actually through the course of this long-term plan matters may change which could affect the final version of the long-term plan. And it's tough for you, Patricia, and the team and politicians, but it's also tough for our auditors, which I think
this originated not in climate change, it originated in Future of Local Government report.
Yeah.
And where they talked about amalgamating councils, but there was quite a bit of pushback at LGNZ level, and with some opposition MPs to say, well, actually, on the issue of climate change, we want some uniformity across the country, which may or may not come from amalgamation. And if it doesn't, then we should climate change sit, and I think it will take some movement. So the movement will be that central government will have to suggest that the regional councils will dictate what needs to be done in that area. So we've got one here, it would cover the other councils, but they've got to have the teeth to be able to enforce it. That's the other issue, which they don't at the moment. So
Yes, active watch, Grant.
Well, take Tom's first because he's.
Oh, Tom?
I'm
Okay,
not
sure.
gonna change on something else.
Yeah, I mean, just on that climate change point specifically, the fact that the Southland Regional Climate Change Strategy, which has been developed by a joint committee of councils, is being led by Environment Southland in partnership with Tamarama. The fact that it's been led by them would mean that if there was the change that the Mayor has suggested might happen, it would actually have almost no impact on us because we're doing it collectively anyway, under the leadership of the Regional Council.
Thanks, Tom. And obviously that's rich material for what Chris is saying, that actually that probably drives some of our assumptions, well, should drive some of our assumptions around the LTP, and that should be reflected. So I think you'll be expecting to see that. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that update. Yeah, Grant.
Yeah, mine's related to, and it's to Chris around how is the information from his report aggregated up and summarised through to central government from councils across the country, and are the key issues, be it climate change or the lack of or the challenges around funding for Three Waters infrastructure, those sorts of things, is it aggregated up and presented to government in a concise way that they are really clear of the issues that we're dealing with at local government?
Chris?
Good question. Is that in relation to, you're talking the long-term plan audit here? In terms of results of the long-term plan audit, or historically in terms of the annual report?
Well, I'm talking to both really. All the information you collect from us, how's it aggregated up to form a view across the country around what are the key issues that we're having to deal with locally?
Yep. So there's basically a sectorised report that comes out every year on the results of the local authority audits, which you'll see is sort of the backward-looking one. It's at a reasonably aggregated level, but it does bring out sort of those key sector themes that you're seeing coming through annual report audits. It also summarises opinion outcomes across all of the councils. Bruce is probably closer to this because he's written one once or twice in a former life. And the long-term plan is a similar report as well that sort of reflects on the long-term plan audits as well. Look, I'm happy to grab you both of those most recent reports and you can sort of see it. I think it's probably the easiest thing to do, might be just to send them through.
That'd be good, Chris, and I could add to that. Thank you for reference to my old past 10 years ago now. Grant, each year the Auditor General tables in Parliament a report on his audit activity in local government. And indeed, that would normally be heard by the Local Government Select Committee. So that is a chance for the Auditor General to put his view, in this case it's a him, it was a her in my day, on the results. And likewise, as Chris is suggesting, at the end of this long-term plan round, probably this time next year, the Auditor General would similarly table a report in Parliament with his views on what he's taken out of the audit, both operationally, but actually ideally in the way that Chris is suggesting on the sectoral issues which are affecting us, obviously with his independent view about those, not necessarily sponsoring a sector view. Yeah. So that makes, I mean, if I can be honest, that makes sponsoring a sector view still really, really important from ourselves and from LGNZ.
But is that jointly presented with the LGNZ?
No, that's solely the. I mean, the Auditor General's independent. He's got to be able to do that from his own.
If it's representing the collective issues that LGNZ should be representing us on, then you'd expect that they would be.
Can't speak for what current processes. I would have gone to a select committee knowing what LGNZ were thinking. Probably Federated Farmers and everybody else under the sun. So that's a different story. But that's old process. I don't know what they do now, and perhaps Chris doesn't either. That's an OAG question. Any other questions for Patricia or for Chris or Jenna? Look, thank you for that, Chris and Jenna. I do appreciate that. I'd like to move to the recommendation which we received the report. Move in a second, please. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Hey, thank you for that, Chris and Jenna. Let you get on with your day, unless you're welcome to stay if you want to. But I took it first on the basis that I thought you might have had a few other things on your plate. So thank you for being here. Can we?
I'll jump away. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, no worries. That's all good. Catch you around, you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Can I move to the internal audit and continuous improvement update report, please, Patricia?
Thanks. I'll take the report as read. We are looking at potentially separating out what we would call continuous improvement activity from what has been raised in audits, whether they be the external audit or the internal audits done by our partner or by ourselves. We're just trying to get the data aligned. We tried to do it for this one. We are getting, we've added in some new graphs in there which shows where some of those activities are coming from and what's been closed. But we are getting a lot of buy-in from parts of the organisation about improving processes and doing those continuous improvement through that team.
Thanks, Patricia. We're minus Peter, aren't we? Because he needed to be out, which was fine for a good darn good reason. So we haven't got the benefit of Peter here today. But if you've got questions for Patricia, any folk? Can I just ask a couple, please? I know we raised this the last one. I shouldn't, and I looked at the minutes. I don't know if I quite saw the answer. There are some really good reports going on there. Do we get to see at least an executive summary of those reports or the results?
Yes,
We do?
we do.
When do we see the four that are mentioned on page 15 of 63? So there's the Building and Environment Regulatory Report audits, although they may be more audits rather than a report. The Payroll Access and Master File, the Building Control Authority, which is obviously from Focus Consulting, a pre-IANS one, and also I noticed there, we've got the annual plan quarterly KPI again. There's an audit there. Have we seen those?
So
Sorry,
the annual plan KPI audit, I'll deal with that one first. That literally is still being discussed.
Yeah,
that's been done. The Payroll Access and Master File data audits are literally just going through and checking any changes to the master file through the payroll. So I wouldn't bring those back. It's literally making sure that any changes to master files have been done. That was the requirement of audit. So it's not it's a more quantitative transactional type one, and I'll go back and see where those building and environment ones are at.
Look, I would want to just argue that even with an audit, if there was a one-page memo saying we've done the master file changes,
they're done fortnightly.
Are they?
Yes.
Yeah,
after each pay cycle, there is an audit done.
Okay, cool.
On the request of external audit and internal audit. It's to cover a control.
You're gonna do the whole year?
I do it every time.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay. Well, look, I just think at some stage it would be good to have a one-page memo that just says, look, we have conducted this for these reasons, and here's the percentage accuracy or whatever it is, because in the long run, as a committee, we need to understand the assurance we can take out of this activity. A, it's very comforting to know it's happening, but B, it'd be good to know at a relevant point what was the actual result. And it may be unfair to ask you this, Patricia. I appreciate the highlighted summary of the recommendations. Just a couple of questions. The first one is Lagoima. We have 18 high. Those are high priority questions around Lagoima. Lagoima might be quite recent, but are we worried about Lagoima? We always get offside, wrong word. It's assuming that we do get offside with the Ombudsman, but there's a high risk of being offside with the Ombudsman. What's the direction of travel in clearing these?
Those being dealt with between Michael's governance team and our information management team. So those are predominantly around workflows. And I understand it also covers off proactive release in those as well. So they're being worked through.
Great, good.
It's in hand, Mr. Chair.
It's in hand. I like that. I'll take comfort from that, Michael. That's superb. Does that also include, by the way, his recent work on the workshops?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, this audit was simply in relation to the workflow system that we use to monitor Lagoima requests and proactive release. There will be something further coming to council on the recent workshop discussion.
Brilliant. And look, the other one, Patricia, that I had there was infrastructure contract compliance. We have 9 outstanding. Again, I'm just trying to remember when the work was done, but contract compliance we live or die by. And I was just wondering again about the direction of travel on those, even though they're moderate rather than high.
I believe there is a work plan in place for dealing with those, and that should be hopefully dropped down again.
Great.
By the next meeting.
Well, I know that Peter will be back, so we'll be able to get an update from him then. Okay, any other questions while I've been asking mine? Yes, Nobby.
Yeah, a couple of things. Just on table 1, what does the term "made" mean? Does that mean that we've done some internal audits? So if you look at, I don't know, building compliance, does that 10 mean that we've done 10 internal audits and 1 has been closed?
There was 10 issues raised, or 10 need areas for improvement raised during that audit.
Okay. Because somebody reading this from outside would be confused with that. I was. And the other issue, Chair, wearing one of your other hats, is the issue of information management. And you've raised the issue about the workshops. And it would be good to know as we go forward how the sector is going to deal with the decisions recently given. Like workshops are workshops, but we have council only meetings here, and they're just a sort of bit of an information share. We've got one today. One, do they need to be open? Well, obviously they can't be. Well, you wouldn't want them to be, I wouldn't think. And it seems to me that Invercargill's way ahead of what other councils are doing in openness, so it's a plus for us. But at what stage do you have the ability to have a closed meeting? And the advice we got was that any of these meetings needs to have minutes. So that creates all kinds of issues as well, like who takes the minutes, who's able to get access to those minutes. What happens if we have a meeting, for argument's sake, to discuss something to do with Michael and one of the staff members? I mean, you can't have another staff member taking the meetings, the minutes of the meeting. So there's a whole lot of, I guess, things that run from that decision that I'm not clear on yet. I don't know how you might know from what you're doing around the sector.
Well, look, I'm going to hand over to Michael really quickly for a comment, but I mean, I guess the Ombudsman's made the presumption that unless there's good reason, they should be public. The question is, do we have a good reason? I don't know if I want to interpret that rule liberally, if I call it a rule, because I suspect that would still get us offside with the Ombudsman. But I think effectively you're saying, Michael, we're preempting a piece of work that you're doing in relationship to that report.
I could say there is a report coming to the council meeting on Tuesday setting out a summary of the report and the steps we'll be taking to address certainly the workshop issues. But I can say the Ombudsman's definition of a workshop, doesn't matter what title you give it, is where staff are sharing information with councillors. So it does not capture councillor-only sessions.
Okay.
It's where it only becomes an issue once staff are involved, and staff are more than Michael. So Michael, as the chief executive, can be here, and it's not a workshop.
Okay.
As soon as you've got any other members of staff, it becomes a workshop within the Ombudsman's definition.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Great, you learn something when you come to a meeting. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Actually, Michael, that's really authoritative and helpful. That's wonderful. Might I say, Lobby? You say through my other stuff, I had 2.5. That might sound an odd number involved in that review, and it was a matter of consternation over many things. Anyway, we're there. Can we move to the resolution? Sorry, were there any other questions? I don't think there were. Can we move to the resolution, please, which we received, the internal audit and continuous improvement report? Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. Can we move to the financial risk update, please?
To the right page.
Patricia, that's you again.
Me again. So this is covers off just the risks that and where we are with a couple of things. So I've included the full credit rating report from Fitch that got released on the 9th of November. It maintained our credit rating at AA+ with a stable outlook, which is similar to what I've said. I've gone through the rest of the councils that Fitch have looked at already this year, and everyone has pretty much stayed with that stable outlook, even though the environment has some uncertainties in the future. But it's very clear that they have, when you read the detail of their report, that our credit rating is predicated on a very conservative debt cap. We are much lower and have taken some very conservative approaches historically in relation to our debt cap, and also on our ability to tax. So across the sector, those councils that are rated typically are an A or higher. I think there might be one at A minus from when I looked through the list. A lot of at AA or higher, and that's because we can tax. We can rate. If we need more money, we have the legal ability to rate, and that is what keeps that credit rating as high as what it is. But it also shows, in a number of the questions that they did ask, it was in relation to our cash management, and we're very clear, and we've put it into our policy that we need to hold a level of liquidity, which our policy has around, we've said around the 20 million of liquid cash. That covers us for short-term need, but also we have a requirement to be able to fund the first 40% of any natural disaster costs under our insurance before the government. So we've got insurance, but there's a number of our assets that we can't insure, so we need to have some cash for those sorts of things as well. So that considers that whole conservative nature. The other aspect that I've raised here, which has come through finance and projects, I put in the Treasury report for the quarter, which will come through. Unfortunately, we've sort of half covered it off in finance and projects, is that we've still got a breach of our fixed interest cover. We are just watching the market at the moment to see where it goes, and then we'll put some more cover in place should we need it. We're just trying to get the final forecasts through as into what our capital borrowing will really look like coming out to those periods. So it's been there for probably 2 years, that breach, and we've just kept watching it. But as interest rates are increasing, we will need to move to more fixed. We will need to probably go floating interest with some fixed cover.
Thank you, Patricia. Right, this is a very interesting report. So Darren and then Tom.
Patricia, could you just help me to understand when you mentioned that part of what weighs in our favour is our ability to tax? Surely that sits with all councils though.
It does, and that's why councils have such a high credit rating. So I think
But not all.
Not all councils are credit rated. So not all members of our GFA have got an external credit rating.
So Southland District doesn't have one, for instance. That's not a negative on the Southland District, but they've chosen not to. It costs us what, 50 grand plus to have each year. So you've got to have a reasonable sized debt portfolio to warrant the trade-off of 50 grand for an assessment, or probably whatever it is these days, versus the drop in interest rate.
So we get preferential interest rates based on the credit rating. So if we were to drop, and I'm going to look at Andrew, to AA minus, the rates go back up again with our GFA. So
Basis points.
it's a few basis points, and then if you're unrated, they're higher again.
Thank you.
So that's not, in most of them, there's no one at B. So there's no B rated councils.
No. Thank you, Darren. Tom.
Actually, Patricia pretty much answered the question I was going to ask, which was about, how does our borrowing rates change as our, as our rating falls? You did say, though, Patricia, that if it fell to A minus, then we would suffer a penalty. So presumably, if it fell to AA, we would not, from what you said. So how much additional debt could we take without us falling to A minus? What's the headroom that we've got before we start to pay more in borrowing rates?
That's a really hard one to actually answer, because it always dependent on the assessment of the rating agency and their assessors. But we certainly got the view when we met with them that it is our 150% debt limit is a big part of it. Though we did indicate that we'd be looking to increase that through the LTP, and that kept it. So I had given them the headline number that we have been potentially talking about, and they have factored that in. So an increase to where we were looking, which was still conservative, just potentially still conservative, and that was in the draft financial strategy at 180%. We gave them that, and that stayed at that. So we can increase that limit and still keep that stable outlook.
Okay, so you've used, through your chair, just to clarify that. So your view would be that we can go to 180 without dropping below A plus, or without dropping below AA.
It's hard to say whether we'd. I think it will maintain it, and that's
AA plus.
That's my assumption. I don't.
And to go below AA, you get a feel for that. I mean, your educated guess is going to be better than my completely uneducated guess. I'm just trying to get a feel for what the headroom is. And I promise I'm not going to then try to fill it. I just like to. I would just like to understand.
Can we note that in the minutes?
I think Andrew's probably got a better feel for it than what I have.
I think I might try and save Patricia a little bit from that one. I think the true answer to that is it's not that binary. It's one of the factors. And I think the key that what you're saying, what Patricia's saying, is that they can see in the forecast we've got a plan, they agree with that plan, the debt goes up to that because that's consistent with the plan. I can tell you the last time we went on negative watch was when we threw a whole heap of debt in without having a plan. And that rattled Fitch more so than the level of debt. They were concerned around the decision-making process and how we got to the decision of doing that without it being in our forecasts. And that was back 16, 17. And so it's a range of factors. And you'd see other councils that are AA that have got much more debt than us. But it's that decision-making process and the certainty that gives Fitch the confidence that you can manage those levels.
Tom, your growth councils in North Holland are probably at 280, 285 with those sorts of these sorts. Well, no, this is a very good rating, but with a level of rating, although some of those are on negative watch. Leslie, I think you had a question.
It's not a question. It was just a comment that the other factor that Fitch would probably look at was if we drastically altered our 20 million cash reserve line. I would think that would cause them a bit of hesitation.
Thanks, Leslie. I'd really encourage you in time, as you go through your LTP, to look at pages 22 and 23 and 24 actually of our agenda, which is summarised as the key rating drivers, Tom. Now it's tied up in a bit of rating orthodoxy and thinking, but it is reflecting the drivers that would impact us, and it goes exactly back to Andrew's point that it's not just what debt cap we might have, but there is a whole range of factors like the quality of our spend, our ability, our preparedness to rate appropriately. There are a couple of drivers there, and I don't know what an SCP means. Do you, in terms of their stuff, Patricia? I should find it for you. But there's things also on page 25, like the net debt to operating balance, which is actually quite critical. You read the drivers; they say if that gets up to 7, they're going to knock us back a cog. So within the report, there is some useful detail about actually how our credit rating would drive if we made certain decisions, but it reflects exactly Andrew's point. You've got to take about 10 different things into account here. It's almost like a matrix, isn't it? As to actually how they might view the number would move.
The SCP is the standalone credit profile.
Thank you. Okay. Rightio. So look, that is actually really useful. One of the things that I took out of it. Sorry, I'm assuming I haven't got any other questions right at the moment.
Yeah, just one.
Nobby.
Oh, okay. I'll come back to you if it's okay, Nobby. Is indeed. The takeaway message I took from this is we control this credit rating through our own financial management practice, and that goes back to Andrew's point, it goes back to Patricia's point that's inside the paper, and where we need to be cognizant of these limits. And the way that you're asking the question, Tom, it's actually really, really important, and it assumes that they keep using it, that we're flexible in our thinking, which essentially means we'll keep ourselves within the parameters of good financial prudence. Nobby, sorry, you've got a
just one issue. Just for those that are probably listening, and people often get confused when they talk to me about what's our debt position. the 150, 180 that Patricia was talking about is percentage, isn't it? It's not 150
Oh, yes.
or 180 million. And the beauty of that is it's 150 of revenue. And of course, if you can increase your revenue, you have the capacity to increase your level of borrowing without losing a rating. So that's a challenge for my colleague to my left who keeps saying that we need to have more revenue. But it is an option.
Yeah, we do need to have the revenue to pay for the interest cost. And the cash flow to meet the principal repayments.
Sure, but revenue is not just rate increases, are there?
No, that's right.
So considerably other.
My argument would be we have another revenue problem, not a rate problem.
Yeah.
Look, it's a fair point. What I think is relevant is that actually for local government, our debt position is related to our revenue, not our assets. Because if you look at the asset leverage, we are very low. We're about 7%. But it actually comes back to the revenue side, which is the net debt to revenue ratio, which becomes really important. Okay, thank you for that. That's really helpful. I mean, let's firstly say well done. I mean, our rating is good. I just wanted to raise the point about the interest rate cover breach. I don't know why it's struck on me for the first time. The Bancorp report, which is the second appendix, notes at the moment our very low cost of debt. I think it's about 2.98%.
2.98,
It's the only council I know, and I can't say I can be comprehensive in my engagements, where we are below 3%. Most are in the high 4s. So we are in a very advantageous position at the moment. But as the debt rolls and matures, your paper has indicated the nature of the increases we are going to face. So I presume this has all been, I mean, it's in our assumptions. I presume it's being factored into our LTP financial model. We're no different to a household having to roll its mortgage. What will change your views around covering the interest rate cover gap?
At the moment, I'm just waiting for the markets have been going up and down. We're trying to see whether we've got some more level of certainty. We are at a point where we're probably looking either between now and Christmas of covering that. There's the uncertainty through the world markets at the moment until we've got a government. We're just holding off getting that one. We haven't taken cover in a number of years, and there's a lot of admin associated with getting covered again through.
We'd achieved it, I think, if I recall correctly, through taking fixed rate debt in the years of low, in the years when our rates were effectively less.
We've effectively been taking fixed rate debt,
as in contrast to
floating rate, and then fixing it using derivatives. Where we probably need to go to now is by taking floating rate debt and then fixing it. We have been taking a lot of commercial paper until we've got some certainty, and that's predominantly backing up the ICL loan. Is the back-to-back with that is commercial paper, so that is floating rate, and that's just, but it's short term,
right? Until
we know what we're doing with that loan.
Can I just point members to page 37 to 63, which is the graphs out of the Bancorp report, and you'll notice on the left-hand column there, the breach, which is on the top debt and cover diagram, and you'll see that that headwind, what I call the headwind, interest rate projection proposed. You can see it climbing for us when we renew. And if you look over back one page to 36, you'll see the main bar diagram shows our debt maturity, which reflects how our interest rates could be affected as we go forward. Grant, I just wanted to have a discussion across the table. I'm a wee bit, we're sitting here with the interest rate cover breach. I take it your finance committee is aware of this, or we don't need to pass any information on to anybody else?
No, we discuss it all the time.
Great, okay.
And it's factored into the long-term planning, and with some of the other decisions we have been thinking about around, funding our capital program. We do that with keeping our revenue in line, which doesn't affect their borrowing capacity, but equally, you know, some of the assets we may have that may be surplus to requirements and how we can leverage and utilise those more fully to maintain a risk profile, fund our capital program, and yeah, not breach our regulatory obligations around some policies. So yeah.
Look, Patricia, I'd like to add a second resolution to our resolution. So we received the report. I'm comfortable with that. But the second one is I would like a report back at our next meeting on either how we've covered the gap or what the plan is. You know, you can overrate a risk, but we are in breach of what is a potential cover. We've got advice that we are. I'd like to make certain that we follow this carefully as a committee. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair, if in that report you might want to question the policy bands themselves and actually say, do we actually challenge the bands in a high-risk economic environment, whether you actually have the right bands in place. That's been the challenge with the breach at the moment, is addressing the breach. You need some more stability in the financial market, and we're not in that position at the moment. So therefore we're being risk averse in relation to actually placing cover.
Yeah.
And that's then brings in the question, is the policy band right? Is the 25% actually right for us? Do we need to lower that because we're being less risky in relation to what we're placing our forward cover? So if you're going to put that into a report, may I suggest that you include a review, have we got the right policy bands in place?
That's a very helpful point. You'd always look at the assumptions on which the actual prudential limit is based. So I'm very comfortable we include that, and I mean that's the thing that Miles should be advising us on. So
I have already given Miles a heads up that we need to have a look at that policy again.
So my intention in having a second resolution that we get a report back is just that we monitor that, whether that's a policy band effect or whether that's we take cover or we do something else. I'm relaxed, but as long as we maintain it while we've got a policy breach, I'm going to be worried. Okay, so look, we've sort of lost the resolutions there.
Just typing that up.
Oh, you're just typing it up. Can I, for the sake of it, I think we've got a clear sense of where the second one's going. So I'll move from the chair that we receive and that we seek a report back at our next meeting on the interest rate cover. Thank you, Leslie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. So we dealt with Audit New Zealand. Can we then deal with the long-term plan decision-making risk? Rhiannon, are you going to get up front too? I wonder whether it might be useful. Looking at the paper, I suspect we need both. So thank you. Thanks, Andrew. We're in your hands.
I'll take the report as read, and we've touched on many of the things, and it was interesting to have a look at that interest rate graph, because I think that tells you a number of things in terms of you thinking about what's happening with the long-term plan. I mean, not only as recorded by Fitch and discussed here, your interest is your borrowing going up, but you're also putting your interest rates up by 2% at the same time, and that's flowing straight into your operating expenses. And so there's a whole heap of pressures, as sort of highlighted in the paper, that are coming through around your decision making, around things that are, for want of a better description, already embedded into the decisions that are going to continue to have impacts as we go through the 10 years. I suppose the point of this paper is really to reflect, before we get into the audit and before we finalise our consultation document, the purpose of the long-term plan and whether or not we think the process that we've put in place to control our compliance with that purpose and to ensure that we engage appropriately with the community on all the issues that we're considering have achieved that result that we're looking for. And just highlighting that it has been a well thought out process, it has been set out and we have gone through it, but are we at that point where we're going to come under pressure, which we are, and will the process, for want of a better description, maintain its integrity to ensure that we're achieving the right outcomes? And that's really a theme that comes through across a lot of the papers today around, as much as we might hate it, it's process. I mean, local government lives on process to ensure that we do these things properly and in the way that we're supposed to, in terms of achieving the outcomes for the community. So that's really what this paper is trying to highlight. I don't know if Rhiannon's got anything to add.
Go in it.
And I suppose.
Radio folk, very interesting paper, and oh, sorry, Andrew.
Sorry, just one more point. You'll see there's a slight change, and this is me effectively putting the asset on you. I mean, your role as the Risk and Assurance Committee in that last resolution. I mean, do we think this is achieving, the process has achieved the outcomes we're hoping to achieve, or do we need to do something differently, or more, or less? Because again, it comes through time and time again. We're reviewing a process. We should review the residual risk rating. Has the process controlled the risk the way we expected it to? And so this is asking for some confirmation around that as to whether or not there's anything we need to do differently.
Thanks, Andrew. I think I got that message, and to perhaps help us go through a process, I do think we should just look through the 6 risks and their residual rating and control effectiveness that you have outlined on pages 58 and 59 of 63. But before I do that, are there any comments or questions folk would like to make? Yes, Tom.
One issue that I think it seems to me is that I'm sure that whenever there's been long-term plans done in the past, there has always been almost an equal level of uncertainty as there is today. There is always date with the future. And it seems to me that one of the problems with long-term plans is their inflexibility. That when we say we need to change some direction because circumstances have changed, we do as council often get the comment, but it's in a long-term plan. You cannot change. I mean, I don't know if this is the time to discuss that, but I wonder if I would like to understand a little bit better the inflexibility around long-term plans, given the fact that there are a number of unknowns about the next 10 years. And in making a long-term plan, we know for absolutely certain circumstances will change. And the long-term plan as it exists today will change, will have to change. It'll be undeliverable, might be better, because things will change. But that inflexibility is the thing that's always concerned me, Chair, and I wonder if you might comment on that, because we have various mitigations, and some are orange, so there are risks, which means that we have to be able to respond when circumstances change. But the ability to respond when you've got a 10-year plan is a bit that concerns me.
Through you, Chair, it was interesting when, and again, this sort of reflects my experience with local government. When I first started was with long-term plans, and there's 2 parts, and I think that what you're really feeling is inflexibility is really, it was interesting looking back at when it came in. Part of the reason was it gave local government more things it could do, and Bruce or someone who was around at the time might have a better idea than me, but the trade-off was the trade-off was that you had to be more overt in your discussions with the community. And so the inflexibility in changing is not that you can't change, it's that you need to go back to the community and explain and have the conversation as to why it's changed. And so it's not, yes, it's want of a better description, a clunky process, but it's not that you can't change, it's just you need to be able to go back to the community and explain, we made these set of assumptions, we followed this process, made these decisions, these things have turned out very differently, this is why we want to change it, and have that conversation. And that is the trade-off that they gave when local government got more power to do things. You can have more power, but we will make you talk to your community more, and that's what the long-term plan process is really driving.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Rhiannon's got a comment.
I think just to give a really practical example, it's why every report that you receive that's around decision making has the strategic implications section, and the manager talks to whether it aligns or doesn't align with the long-term plan. And as Andrew says, it's then really around triggering the significance and engagement policy at a higher level.
Darren?
I'll be concise. Yeah, it's an echo. It's not that the LTP is inflexible. There's just a process you have to go through in order to flex, and it depends on the degree of flex that you're wanting to make as to whether or not you've got to go back to the public and consult. Going into the last long-term plan, nobody made provision for a pandemic. Didn't stop us.
Thanks. Right, I wonder if we could look at page 58, Andrew, and 59, because there's one strategic risk noted there. Look, let's I look at the Now, the question that you've posed for us and comes through in the resolutions, are we comfortable with the residual risk? Are we comfortable about the controls in place, and are they effective? So I do actually just want to devote a couple of minutes to actually just whipping through these. I wonder, Andrew, if you could start though with the second one, because that's where you've highlighted that the controls in staff's view is defective or negligible. And I just wonder if we could have a quick discussion about that, please.
And I think that goes to the crux of the issue, that we can't. So normally when you put in place a control, you're trying to change the likelihood of something occurring. And so it just reflects the fact that we don't really have a lot of control around changes that central government might make. We obviously participate in groups that submit and all those sort of things, and that's why we have that whole work program where we do try and submit to things that the government puts out. But in the end, the government goes and does what it does. But this to me more turns on this idea that the paper touches on around uncertainty as opposed to risk management. We know something will change, and we can measure the range of the impact of those changes. It doesn't make it uncertain, it just makes it risky. And the risk we have is that when we get confronted with what is a risk assessment, we call it uncertain and therefore don't make a decision. Whereas we really need to accept that there is a range of changes that might occur. We can measure the range of those changes and make a decision that takes a point amongst those ranges. So that's I don't think there's anything we can do in this space to reduce the risk, and I think we acknowledge that. But it does flow through to potentially having impacts on our decision making, and we can manage the risks around our decision making by accepting that the uncertainty is just a risk assessment. It's not something where we just say we don't know what the government's going to do, therefore we won't do anything, because that is in itself, as the paper points out, a decision. And if we don't do anything, then we've made a decision, and we need to understand the implications of that.
And I would just note, because I went back to it, because we did that good work in the last meeting, Andrew, around the consequence, and you've repeated the table there. I just noticed that we're saying that this uncertainty crystallising is likely, and we know it. I mean, it's obvious, but actually the consequence could be major, which, if I got it correctly, could mean a change in level of service, could mean a change in restructuring the organisation and or staff. So the consequences are pretty high related to this. The reality of it is that, as you're saying, is we don't necessarily have a lot we can control over this. We are a receiver, which puts us in a residual risk position that is challenging, along with the rest of the sector, might I say. But it is challenging for us to do, other than some scenario modelling or that parameter range. And I would have thought Chris's report about the LTP audit with the 2 years of Three Waters in is an exact example where statutorily that's correct, but actually what is the probable line at the moment, we don't know, and that's the challenge. Yes, Rhiannon.
So yeah, just wanted to give a pragmatic example of how we've then responded to that, what Andrew's talking about in relation to Three Waters. So we've gone ahead and we've put the 2 years into the budgets for the Three Waters. However, we've included the Three Water decision making into the infrastructure strategy, even though that's not legally required, to reflect that whatever happens, we believe that's really important context for the community. And we're going to attach the addendums from the NTU, which will give that longer forward picture. So that's how we've tried to deal with that range that you're talking about on that particular issue.
It's really good. I mean, and well done. I mean, I think that's, I mean, it's not necessarily, well, it is a control in the sense that we've allowed for the fact what happens if at the outside we own these assets now, the infrastructure strategy is the next 30 years. That becomes really, really important. So that's encouraging to hear. Folk, any other questions on that at this stage, or will you have a look at a couple of the other ones here?
Just
yes,
on that,
Andrew?
one of those other uncertainty things around climate change, I was going to chime in. One of the things that the government is looking at doing, and it's interesting that Chris was talking about it, is effectively prescribing the way that we assess climate change risk. So some of the papers that are floating around have a proposal whereby effectively the assessment is given to us so that we don't, everyone's using their own assessment, which is why you're getting all the different results around the risks. they're going to prescribe for local government, this is the way you are to assess climate change risk. And that will create that consistency across the sector.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's just have a couple of comments without wanting to make this sound like I'm extracting hen's teeth here. Effective relationship with key stakeholders interested me, and Tom, I reflect on this one because it goes back to potentially your comment around the climate change and the regional working group. Actually, are we aligned becomes actually a really interesting point. And I make no more comment on that. The other one, Andrew, that I just wanted to give me a wee bit of advice on, please, was the bottom one, which is that the necessary governance skills and experience or have conflicting priorities may occur. Can you give me a fish it out for me, please, particularly around the controls?
It's that risk that we always get, and it's the risk to a certain extent that Councillor Campbell alluded to, where we have differences of opinion and emphasis changes in the middle of a process or after we've completed the process, and so the certainty that we hope to achieve from the process we've gone through in the long-term plan decision making doesn't hold. And so you've got, and it feeds back into the top one as well. And the top one I threw in there around staff is not necessarily one of the ones we call out strategically, but it's, again, to Councillor Campbell's point, if we have to go out and reconsult with the community, that's a big disruption and a big interruption to the normal BAU program of staff. And so it's that risk we have all the time where, for whatever reason, I'm not saying it's a bad reason necessarily, but priorities change, and all of a sudden the guidance given to staff and the work that needs to be done to pick up those new priorities is out of whack with where we already were. And I think it's, I mean, to be honest, it reflects a political risk, and that's the environment we're in. It's not just this council, it's every council. Councillors come in, or even mid-term, priorities change, and it's something that we need to try and manage, but it's recognising that it exists, and part of it comes back to an understanding of fundamentally why we go through the processes we do. It is designed so that the community is taken along the journey, that all those things happen. We're prudently using our funds, and so whilst it may be perceived as red tape, that certainty protects the community from big shifts in emphasis that ultimately cost the community because we've wasted money.
Okay, I think there's a strong sense here the key controls are particularly around clarity, both in our thinking now before we finalise the model and in the outcomes and the objectives. We are recording well, and I presume we are, the rationale for the position we've taken now, because I think we well know that uncertainty will mean we probably want to change these. Or rather, as you point there, a future council will have to potentially look and change this. They need to understand why were we in this place today making that call. So clarity around the totality of our intentions now being transparent to the whole council is really important, Tom.
I think actually Andrew might have made this point, but it seems to me that the greatest value that you get from a long-term plan is not so much the final document, which you know is going to be wrong, right? You're not going to do those things. It's the process that you've gone through to develop that, and the debates and the analysis, and that's where the real value is. It seems to me.
Right from the start, Tom, right from 2004, when the first LTPs had to come out, as auditors, we always said the only thing we know about this plan, it's wrong. Which made you wonder about the value of the opinion. Okay, look, that's really helpful. Oh, yes, Nobby.
Yep, just as a reflection and building a little bit on what Tom said earlier on, I think it's no secret I don't particularly like long-term plans. I just think they set us up to fail. And if I go back to the last training, I think we had 4 or 5 projects as front end that we had to deliver. We delivered one in a delayed manner, which we had to redo, which was the stuff at the pool, and the other 4 we didn't even start. And so and if you look back, you see that all the way through. It's just a wish list of things we'd like to do. but it still worries me, and this is not reflective of Andrew, but it worries me that the organisation gets to a stage where it's fear of risk, or its adherence to a long-term plan, and you see comments like the governance skills and experience or having conflicting priorities leads me to believe that you really want sort of councillors that are just going to rubber stamp everything. It sits within a long-term plan, we don't change. A good example is we came in after the last election and cancelled a couple of projects. The city didn't go belly up when we did that. It was just reacting to the environment that we faced, and our priorities changed. And I would have thought that having a governance area that had conflicting priorities is actually what democracy is built on. Otherwise, we go back to having a more centralised process where a party of 10 councils would stand and they'd all be singing from the same song sheet. That wouldn't be healthy either. So,
Chair, if I can, I don't think Andrew's report criticises that. I think it recognises it.
Yep, I understand that. All I'm saying is that it seems to me that the councils that have done well around the country, and I engage with some of them, they are very nimble. They have the ability to be quite flexible, respond very quickly, weigh up the risks of moving away from what might be in a long-term plan into something else in an annual plan. This sort of tends to lock us in a little bit, I think. That's just my feeling of all that.
Again, Chair, it doesn't lock us in. It just says if you want to change, show there's a considered process. And in fact, if you've done that and you've reacted to something, it shows the benefits of being nimble and smart. But it is a risk, because sometimes, and I'm not talking about this council, I've seen decisions change because of a new political will that's come in that probably weren't smart moves. Sometimes it's a negative risk, and sometimes it's just a change that can happen because it's right to.
I think we have to take an abrasive view of the LTP, and I would hope, and I'm not party to your workshops or indeed your council meetings, Cliff, but there is robust idea, competition of ideas, if I can call it that. That's democracy, isn't it? Around actually what goes into this LTP.
If I can give a reflection, Chair, having been through every LTP since they came in, the discussions that are going on now are the most robust I've observed.
Good. Well, that's encouraging to hear, Darren. So look, no, not a but thank you, because I think that's actually really important. I think actually the LTP, though, Nobby, I don't want to mention the council, but has been a significant driver of organisational performance. In other words, there has been that robust debate in setting up what was now the 21, sorry, the 21-31 LTP, so the last one, to drive delivery, because actually the council settled on its priorities, and it has driven hard those priorities. I won't mention what it is. I might over a cup of tea, but it's been useful from that aspect as well. Not
so just going to do a final reflection as well, which is around in the bottom end of that cluster there, not the one that's on the following page, but the one that talks about the governance skills and experience. There's an interesting comment there, are not in the best interest of council, and that's a statement in its own right for me, because when I think about how we do our long-term plans, and Darren's quite right, I've only sat through two, but certainly miles apart this time from last time. Last time was terrible. We were getting to the end of the last triennium when we looked at the long-term plan, and we had workshops with 2 and 3 people here. People just got worn out by it all. It just seemed we put an awful lot of energy into long-term planning, and then don't seem to put a hell of a lot of energy into either delivering it or alternatively of being nimble and being flexible as we go along. And so, when we get papers that we put out to the community and we get 200 ratepayers back commenting, we get excited by 200, yet it's only 1%. So I guess it seems to me it's very much driven by the quality of the people that want to attend workshops, and not by those that sit away from them and mumble and grumble.
As an observation, though, Nobby, I think one of the challenges we had with that last long-term plan is that some councillors were quite simply exhausted from the whole working together process that they went through, which just, it sucked a lot of time. And to be fair, it took priority because it had to. And so when it got to the other end of the triennium, people were knackered.
Look, final question, please, to Patricia here. Well, actually, it might be you, Rhiannon. Page 63 of 63, the last page of your open agenda. I always am interested in the timetable. I know we've got a paper in PX, and maybe you want to say I'll talk about it then. But I shaded the last box, Tuesday, the 28th of November, and it said those 5 really important things. How are we going on those?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the page number?
The last page, 63 of 63. It's got the appendix to the paper. It's got the timetable, and Tuesday, the 28th of November, seems to me to be a key date.
Yeah, so this is a really important workshop. It is the final budgeting workshop ahead of the activity plans, as Patricia said, going to the December council meeting. I guess this really speaks to some parts that Andrew's pointed out in this report, that we're now coming to the crunch point. This whole program was really designed by council. It was your strategic priorities that set the first 6 months of the program, and that's flowed through into all the technical documents that then sit underneath. And now we're coming to the balancing act that arrives in every long-term plan process in terms of finalising where everything is going to sit in terms of the budget. So Patricia and the finance team working really hard on that at the moment. So it is a crucial workshop on the 28th. The draft financial strategy and infrastructure strategy have already been received by council, so we've done a lot of that work. Right. But now it is about making the final tweaks and getting the final direction from council to finish the budgets.
Brilliant. Well, I'm glad to hear that's on track, Ren, and I think when I noted it, I wrote down this is the sharp end of the LTP plan, so I agree with you entirely. Can we move to the resolutions, please? And in light of the discussion we've had, let's just look at it carefully. We received the report. We note the difference between decision making under uncertainty versus risk and the implications, versus risk and the implications for decision making. Okay, we've talked a lot about uncertainty, so I think we've got ourselves there. We confirm the appropriateness of the current controls to manage decision-making risks through the long-term planning process, and we focused a wee bit on the residual risk environment that we are in. And we confirm that the current residual risk rating, and here's the critical thing, what do? Recommend, not recommend further action be taken to reduce the residual risk. We've got a decision to make here, folk. Anybody want to lead me on this one? Yes, Nobby.
So on page 61, at the very end, there's a statement that says there is a risk that the failure to appropriately identify and manage strategic risk leads to a weakening of risk management at ICC. And I guess that's not a statement, it's just saying if we don't do that. My worry with that is we've had a good audit this time with Audit New Zealand. We've got good internal controls in place. Fitch is still saying they have confidence in us. I would not be considerate of doing too much more in the risk space. I think we've got that well covered compared to what I hear elsewhere.
Yes, Tom.
I think flowing from the risk analysis and the recognition everybody has that it'll be wrong is the extent to which that concept that Nobby mentioned of being nimble is actually built into the long-term plan itself. So, in other words, to what extent do we actually reflect in the long-term plan the need to, be constantly looking at the horizon and changing where it's necessary? I mean, maybe that's in there already, but maybe it's not. Maybe it should be just actually more explicit.
Yes, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I looked at this particular recommendation, I thought if we were going to take the recommend further action be taken to reduce the residual risk, we actually needed to fill in a little bit more about what we were recommending.
Exactly.
If we go that route, at the moment it would be a slightly meaningless phrase. if we're going to go that route, my feeling is we need to put a little bit more detail about what further actions we would therefore be talking about. And at the moment, I'm tending to think we're in a situation where the watching brief of the not recommend route, feeling comfortable presently with where we are, but knowing that we have a watching brief on the possibility that there might be further actions which will arise, might be more where we are.
Have you got words you'd like to put in there, Leslie, if I could be blunt?
You mean if we went down the recommend route?
Oh, whatever route you'd like to recommend.
You don't need them if you go for not recommend.
Well, if we...
Sorry, I'm going to say, if I could just
Yeah.
jump in there. Listening to Leslie, Darren, I think she's saying, we've had a discussion on the risks, at least the ones that I've chosen to focus on, and we've recognised essentially it's a partial effective, but we haven't identified other action that should be taken at this point. I think you're trying to insert the difference between...
My feeling is if we go down the not recommend route, we probably need to add some words, but with an ongoing awareness that there may be further actions identified in the future. If we go down the recommend route, I think we would need to put in some
steps,
definite further action steps we believe should be implemented now, and I haven't necessarily worked out some words for going down that route. But the not recommend route, I would say we put in something that refers to possible future identification.
Okay, we have a watching brief. So I've got Darren, I've then got Grant, and I think Michael would like to make a comment. Did you want to make a comment too, Ria?
Oh, I'll just wait for them first. They might.
Okay, so Darren, Grant, then Ria, and Michael, if we want to jump in there too.
So at this stage, I'm in the not recommend, and I think all we need to do is add at the end, at this stage or at this point, which gives you the flexibility further on if there is a need for further action to be able to respond. But at this stage, we don't need to take any further action.
Thank you, Darren. Grant.
Yeah, it's ambiguous and to the point where long-term plan development. So are we talking about how we've developed the long-term plan and should we make amendments to its residual risk, or are we talking about how that plan, if it's enacted, would present risk to us?
I think it's
particularly around finance, so it's not clear.
It's the former, which is actually, if I've got it correct, it's the former, and it's actually about going back to those risk schedules on 58 and 59, which is about the preparation, decision making around what is the long-term plan. Do we need to have more controls in place?
Well, that's not clear by that statement, then, is it?
It is. It's,
I've got Ria, then I've got Michael, and I've got Tom.
Darren basically covered what I was going to say. So.
I like the way you're thinking.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. It's kind of a difficult one to answer from the C's perspective because I've got a public excluded update in relation to strategic risks to Council for a number of reasons, but some of those components do refer to the long-term plan and the impacts of the mitigation steps we have in place. But from perspective of putting a recommendation or not recommend in here, I think it's difficult for Council to make a call to provide recommendations without actually hearing that brief. So I think it might be something that needs, subject to the next meeting, that you actually make a call on if you want to make any recommend any mitigation steps post hearing the update in relation to that.
Right, Nobby.
Yeah, when I look back to that schedule again on pages 4 and 5 of the report, I mean, what we're getting signalled there is if we don't, all of those statements start with the word if ICC. I mean, I look at that cluster of 6. I don't see major risks in most of those areas. I think we'll see when we get the health and safety report shortly. Done some outstanding work in the last 6, 8, 9 months in health and safety compared to where we've been in the past. So, you know, that leads us to think that we've got a whole lot of major risks that we've now got to sort of mitigate as we go forward. You know, I just don't see that. I mean, I can't reflect, Darren can, but if I reflect on the way the council's currently working, the way it worked last time, and the subsequent involvement of DIA, just worlds apart. So while it's all right to flag that if we didn't do something, but the question is, are we doing okay in most of those areas? And I think we are. You know, people might have other views on that.
Which not recommend would be the logical line. Okay, anything else that people would like to say at this point? Yes, Tom. Sorry, did I miss you out? Sorry, my apologies.
I think Michael actually was going to be before me and he never had a turn, did you, Michael?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Yes, you did.
Oh, you did? Okay. Okay. Look, what I would actually like to see as an additional line item is if ICC does not recognise change circumstances. I think if I look at the line items above it, it is about, you know, not doing the things that we said. But I think equally important, and it comes back to, you know, the point that Nobby made earlier about, you know, being prepared to change, is if we do not recognise the need for change, we do not recognise change circumstances, and therefore the need to change the plan. To me, that's an additional risk item. So, I mean, that would be, you know, recommend further action. That'd be the further action that I would recommend personally.
Right, I need a feeling of the meeting. I just wonder, I'm looking at probably Michael and Michael. Is there a way for us to actually hold this recommendation over until we've heard from you and PX?
Through self-chair, I'd be happy if, from a council perspective, if it went with the not recommend, given we've got the actions in there, because you'll be getting an update in relation to what the impact of those actions are from myself. So you'll be able to reflect on those in the next meeting to whether you actually want to make any further amendments. For us to make any alterations on actions during that time frame will be difficult anyway. So it would hold it over to say, subject to reviewing it at the next meeting.
Well, I think that's exactly where Leslie's trying to get us to, and Darren in some sense too, at this stage, is that we are going down the line of not recommended further action to be taken at this stage, but subject to new information and ongoing review. Are folk happy with that?
That seems to be.
Okay.
That seems to be the way to proceed.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you. I wonder if we could. Do I need to wait for you to type that up, or can we keep moving? So it's not. It's not at this stage. But subject to ongoing review.
Yes.
Rightio. Okay. Well, I've again done it myself, so I better move the motion. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Leslie. Is there any debate on the motion? Being none, I'll put it all those in favour. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you. That gets us to the end of the open session. I wonder if we could just move to the resolution to exclude the public before we have a short break. We have got a number of matters there that are on page 3 of your agenda, which are outlined as scheduled for PX with the recommendations. I'll move from the chair that we move into PX for the reasons stated. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Ria. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Brilliant. Look, it's, oh, my clock's